I'm so happy and honored to be here with you. First of all, good morning to you all. And I wish to thank you all and the organizers for inviting me here today. I am very happy to share with you some of my thoughts about this particular subject. As Matthew said, yeah, better? Okay, as Matthew said, my interests are very varied, but my background, where I come from, is education. My first degree was in education. My passion is education, and I've been an educator for many decades now. I think I view education as a very important constituent of all of our lives. Okay, so I see education not as just belonging to the classroom, but as part and parcel of our lives, our everyday lives, the way society functions, democracy. It's all about education, right? And this is sort of my viewpoint. Now, departing from that, I started delving into interests about how technology, how we can empower learners, as is the theme of this conference, empowering learners and educators, how we can empower them through various aspects of technology. And naturally, me being a gamer myself and having played many games when I was much younger, my interest sort of shifted there. And we started also experimenting with various ways of how to give education to people. And we had experiments running in VR in various uses of games. And your question also sort of like is what triggered me. I wanted to dig a bit deeper into what was happening with our participants, with our learners, because in certain instances we came across an experiment where we wanted to do something good, and somehow we stumbled across an issue which I thought was much bigger than what we were doing, and this was ethics. Ethics is a word that is, I think, underrated. Everybody might speak a lot about ethics, but in reality, when we start doing our research and our experiments, we tend to overlook it. And when it comes to AI, especially, and technology, for the greater good of technology, we do tend not to see the wider implications of what we might be doing. Before I start my presentation, I just want to highlight sort of like where this, it's not such a recent interest, but it's certainly a very strong one indeed. We were doing this work with teachers, with educators, where we created an environmental setup using virtual reality. So that teachers, especially teachers in the primary classroom, could have a first-hand experience of what it was like to be a child on the autism spectrum in their classroom. This was spurred by a need because my own child was in a primary class age, and I could notice there were a few children on the autism spectrum in his class. And every time I went to class for some presentation or other, I started noticing that these children and teacher, there was this kind of relationship where the teacher was seeing children as all of the same, as all, they were all the same. She was teaching the content. She wasn't addressing the human who was there. And so I said, let's try to help these teachers understand what it was like and create this experiment where they could be, they could firsthand experience a day, a simple day. So we started the research and we started speaking to parents of children with autism. We started speaking to experts on autism, about autism. We started trying to design this experience. We were toddlers in this, okay? George has highlighted, sometimes you start designing, but you're testing really. So we were quite some toddlers. And however, the prototype that emerged was quite interesting. We used real actors, real filming. We were doing all these cool film direction things and editing and stuff. And the final product was very good. The teachers, we tested it out with around 300 to 400 teachers, primary school teachers. And the results, the feedback we got was quite amazing. But there were a few things. Well, first of all, and at some instances, parents wanted to try it out as well. And what happened was that while the teacher would look at the classroom and recognize the chaos, that underlines the primary classroom, the parent of the child with autism was going crazy. They were telling us, this is a jungle. Is this where I'm sending my child towards? It's like a lamb to the slaughter. I don't want my child to go to school. It was such a powerful experience that we didn't take into consideration that it might harm the psychological state of that parent. Obviously, it was designed for teacher, and that was mistake number one that we did. When you're designing things like this for education and training, when you're designing powerful experiences where you want to immerse users and you want to have these users experience something using games or using virtual reality experiences, then you need to make sure that the persons you're designing for, you're aware of those persons' needs, the way they operate, the mental associations, their psychology and their cognitive use. So that was mistake number one. Mistake number two was that obviously the experience, we didn't have funding. We're always chasing funding. So the experience was quite short. It was only a 6-minute experience. The thing is that the teachers, suddenly after the 6 minutes, they thought they knew all about the condition of autism, when in fact, autism is such a complex condition. So, you run the risk of providing experiences for people, and then people will think, oh, I know what it is like to be on the autism spectrum, but it's very difficult to do that. We did design another one for nurses this time, for mental health nurses, along the same lines, but we did not take into consideration autism. We took into consideration schizophrenia, and this is where we were really walking a very fine line on ethics and ethical research. However, we decided, because we knew the extent, the power that these experiences have, we wanted to not have such an immersive, realistic experience. We designed it in graphics and sketches, and we had an AI assist. This is where artificial intelligence came in, an AI assist to monitor what that person was feeling at the moment. So when the person was feeling extremely stressed, as indicated by the heart rate, then the AI would would sort of mellow down the experience. The experience would be a bit milder. The language that was used would be less violent, less aggressive. The visuals would be a bit less gory. So these are sort of lessons, but these are the sort of experiments that got me thinking about the wider ethical implications of what we are looking at. So this is how I want to start my talk today. Okay, so AI is more than just, I see AI as more than just computation. No, it is more than just a technology. I think Mary said it. We're humans. The AI is impacting humans, and I want to see AI not from just the technical perspective, but I want to see it from the human perspective. I want to see how AI can impact humans' lives and how it can impact, and what we can do to try and try to, as much as possible, mitigate the threats and also mitigate the harms that a person can go through the use of AI. So this is the era of AI, right? We are defined by the power of technology. And as humans, we seem to be in love with this technology. Sometimes we go overboard and we think that technology is going to provide all the answers to the problems, it's like the panacea of everything. But when it comes to humans, it's not like, okay, we got ChatGPT, we got GPT-4, we got loads of transformer models coming up. large language models. We can do so much, but have we really thought about the implications of that? It has created, in fact, ChatGPT, once it was rolled out within a month, it was creating ripples around the globe, right? People were in conflict, universities started banning them. People were, all of a sudden, everybody was saying, oh, but now my students are going to cheat, my students are not going to know anything, okay? And all this widespread fear, okay, that it was creating. This is the era that we are living on. But what we have to really think about is this. It's not just ChatGPT and whether students cheat or not, really. That's not the issue. The issue here is that we are being driven by a series of algorithms. You know, what shapes us, what makes us, the thoughts that are formed into our brain are the result of the information that we consume, are the result of the experiences that we design. Okay, so the teachers sitting in on my autism application were experiencing the content that ultimately my team of people had designed. If we look at, I don't know, Amazon, if you look at Netflix, whatever, you are the consumer of the information that an algorithm is going to choose for you. Yeah. Do we think about that? Do we think that our thoughts in reality, the thoughts that shape us, that make us, that shape our behaviors, are the products of what's out there? So these are the questions that we really need to ask. What can we do? Now, recently we've seen this drive. No, I was, talking to Mary yesterday. There were so many task forces set up, so many strategies drafted, but really and truly, practically, legally, we're still light years away. Okay, so we've got big tech companies coming up with huge language models, with huge creative models. Okay, DALL-E creating beautiful works of art, individual works of art, fantastic. But where does it all lead us? What is happening there? What kind of ethical and practical issues do we really need to consider before moving full steam ahead with the technology? For example, I mentioned DALL-E. DALL-E is a program very much like ChatGPT, but instead of text, it uses, it creates, let's say, unique works of art, right? Unique. However, they're not really unique, isn't it? Because DALL-E is learning from paintings which it finds all across its data set, but we don't know where the data set is coming from. A friend of mine who's an artist said, okay, so I tend to put my works of art on Instagram, right? So what happens if DALL-E generates my, a representation, a transfer of my style, the style I have been building throughout years, okay? What's going to happen there? And I said, nothing. There's no legal framework. There's no plagiarism issue. There's no copyright issues. It's not just about protecting the person who's actually done it, but it's also about the person who's using it. Does the person who's using it really know what's happening? Okay, we don't know those. So if we were to describe, okay, what we mean by AI, we will find a lot of definitions. And there's a lot of hype at the moment about AI, what it does, what it is capable of doing, how, what we need to do to reach a clear understanding about the good and the bad of AI. At the moment, even in our faculty, in our department, we do quite a lot of research, but I consider it quite a narrow vision of AI. We target a specific application, we target a specific field, sector, something that we do for the good of society. We want to improve the way society operates, and this is something that we're working on. But there are visionaries out there, and there are leaders in technologies that are working on something a bit bigger, a bit broader, towards this idea of having a general kind of AI. Okay, let me show you this brief video, which I have borrowed from The Age of AI, from a series, The Age of AI. Well, basically, what's happening here is sort of like, this video is meant to unpack certain thoughts and maybe raise certain questions and provoke certain thoughts into where AI is heading.
AI is teaching the machine, and the machine becoming smart.
Each time we create a more powerful technology, we create a bigger lever for changing the world.
Autonomous driving started.
It's an extraordinary time, one of unprecedented change and possibility.
Intelligence used to be the province of only humans, but it no longer is. We don't program the machines, they learn by themselves.
That's good. Right. My background's always been a mixture of art and science. I ended up doing a PhD in bioengineering. Then I ended up in the film industry, working on King Kong to Avatar, simulating faces. I'd got to a point in my career where I'd been, lucky enough to win a couple of Academy Awards. So I thought, okay, what happens if we actually tried to bring those characters to life that actually you could interact with? Baby, ooh, what can you see? So Baby X is a lifelike simulation of a toddler. Hey, are you excited to be here? She's actually seeing me through the web camera. She's listening through the microphone. Ooh, yeah. Baby X is about exploring the nature of how would we build a digital consciousness if it's possible. We don't know if it's possible, but we're chipping away at that problem. Hey, baby, hey.
Problem is an understatement for what Mark's chipping away at. His vision of the future is one where human and machine cooperate, and the best way to achieve that, he thinks, is to make AI as lifelike as possible.
Peekaboo.
Which is why he began where most life begins, a baby, modeled after his own daughter.
So if we start revealing her layers, she's driven by virtual muscles, and the virtual muscles in turn are driven by a virtual brain. Now these are radically simplified models from the real thing, but nevertheless, they're models that we can explore how they work because we have a real template that exists, the human brain. So these are all driven by neural networks.
A neural network is a virtual, much simpler version of the human brain. The brain is the most complex system in our body. It's got 85 billion neurons, each of which fire nonstop, receiving, processing, and sending information. Baby X's brain is nowhere near as complex, but that's the goal. Instead of neurons, it's got nodes. The more the nodes are exposed to, the more they learn.
What we've learned is it's very hard to build a digital brain, but where we want to go with it is we're trying to build a human-like AI which has a flexible intelligence that can relate to people.
I think the best kind of systems are when humans and AI work together. One of the biggest misconceptions of AI is that there is a super intelligent being, or what we call generalized AI, that knows all, can do all, smarter than all of us put together. That is a total misconception. AI is built on us. AI is mimicking our thought processes. AI is basically an emulation of us.
Like visionaries before him, Mark's a dreamer. The current state of his moonshot, however, is a little more earthbound.
Thank you for granting access to your microphone. It's good to hear you.
Today, most avatars are basically glorified customer service reps.
Rest assured, your health is my primary concern.
They can answer simple questions and give scripted responses.
I love helping our customers, so I'm keen to keep learning.
Beats dealing with automated phone lines for sure, but it's a far cry from Mark's ultimate vision.
Hey, baby, hey.
To create avatars that can actually learn, interpret, and interact with the world around them, like a real human.
What's this? Spider. So we're starting to get a spider forming in her mind here. She's starting to associate the word with the image. So baby, spider. Spider.
Spider.
Good. Okay. What's this?
Spider.
No. This is a duck. Look at the duck.
Duck.
Yeah.
Baby X uses a type of AI called object recognition. Basically, it's how a computer sees. how it identifies an object like a spider or tells the difference between a spider and a duck. It's something that you and I do naturally. But machines like Baby X need to learn from scratch by basically sifting through enormous piles of data to search for patterns, so that eventually it can drive a car or pick out a criminal in a crowded photograph, or tell the difference between me and that guy.
But now I'm going to tell her that spiders are scary. Look out! Ah, scary spider! Ah. Hey, don't cry. It's okay. Hey, it's okay. Now she's responding emotionally to me as well. So we've gone all the way down to virtual neurotransmitters, hormones, and so forth. So Baby X has a stress system. If I give her a fright, boom! So we'll see basically some noradrenaline was released then, and she's gone into a much more vigilant state of mind.
What Mark is working on is known as affective computing, AI that interprets and simulates human emotion.
I believe that machines are going to interact with humans just the way we interact with one another, through perception, through conversation. So as AI continues to become mainstream, it needs to really understand humans. And so we want to build emotion AI that enables machines to have empathy.
Hello, Peppa.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so I'll stop that there. So this was meant to show like where research work is heading, right? It opens a Pandora's box of thoughts about where we want to live, where we want to go. And that's an example of a general artificial intelligence. Maybe, we usually see that in movies, maybe with less drama. But this is all about, as I mentioned, the exchange or interchange between humans and machines. The Turing test that was first designed by Alan Turing was meant to ascertain whether a machine is truly intelligent and whether a human can rightly be fooled into believing that a machine's actions, behavior, and responses are indeed humans. Now, when we talk about ethics, we cannot not take into consideration the field of psychology. Okay, some of the questions that were asked here, sort of bordering on this idea, no, because when we talk about AI and psychology, I feel there is a common axis here. There's the understanding the processes that give rise to this intelligent behavior. In the case of psychology, most of the research work focuses on the human beings. When we talk about AI, the study focuses on machine, and we talk instead of information processing rather than mental processing. Now, in general, when we talk about psychology focuses on three main axes of the person. There's cognition, there's emotion, and there's behavior. Now, from the point of view of weak AI, the narrow AI, machines do not think. They might process information, they do not feel, although they can identify emotions. And they have behavior that is determined by the output of their algorithms. We could say that psychology deals with biological organisms, usually they're the human species, while AI deals with artificial cognitive systems. But deep down, both types of minds face the essential challenge, that is adapting to the environment, as we saw, okay, and trying to solve problems even in situations where there's uncertainty, where there's ambiguity, where there is noise. This capacity is what makes us as human beings quite unique. Now, there are various applications that we speak about. We see a lot of applications, especially, this conference is about education, so we see a lot of applications. We've got projects running on, for example, recognizing emotion from students. Georgia said, even when the experiments with gamers were done, you've got sensors, you've got cameras that can sense a person's emotion. And there's a lot of research in this area. The reason and the scope for this research is quite, it's for the ultimate good, so that the teacher may recognize whether the student is maybe feeling frustrated or maybe feeling bored. If the teacher can change what's happening in the classroom, can change the content to address the needs of the student, to stimulate the student a little bit more, no? But there are also things that we need to think about, the negative things. What if the student really does not want to want the teacher to know what the student is feeling, what the learner is feeling. Do we really need to give AI the right to scan a person's face whilst that person is sitting at a lecture? Also, what happens with all those collection of faces, those expressions? What happens when the AI goes wrong? What happens if the AI does not recognize a proper expression? What if, I'm feeling okay, but the AI is saying, is thinking that I'm feeling really depressed today, but I'm not. Do I have to smile, or maybe my face is the way it is, grumpy? I don't know. How can the AI say that? So these are sort of questions that there are various research and loads of interesting, cool projects that are running around, but we have to think a bit of the wider picture, and we have to think about the wider implications of those. And when it comes to practical applications, for example, I mentioned image processing, so emotion. Situations of risk to health, we had quite a number of projects where we would have cameras and even drones monitoring people, maybe people having on-the-job training, that may be posed to situations which could affect their risk, their health, which could be a risk to their health, a threat. On the one hand, it's great. We're trying to save lives. But on the other hand, we need to think a little bit about, what about the surrounding areas? What are we picturing? What are we getting access to? Who is having that kind of access? Where is the data coming from? And all that stuff. And then we've got natural language processing. So many learning management systems were running projects where they could identify, for example, sentiments through learning analytics about what was going on in discussion groups. Okay, so the initial scope would be, okay, all right, I want to see whether my students are happy, in the course, whether, there are various keywords that indicate that they're satisfied with the content that is being displayed and with the way this study unit is being structured. And that is good. That is very good. But we also need to think about what happens when something is flagged and it really is not a problem. Okay, what happens and who is going to deal with it? There was a question, I think, about conflict, right? You asked a question about what happened to the children when there was a conflict. Ideally, in these kinds of situations, there are experts, psychologists that are roped in, counselors that are roped in that can help. Okay, so it's not just identifying, but it's also offering help to the human and to the individual. Now, these are things that can be done. It doesn't mean that research should be stopped. It just means that we need to be aware of them. We need to have practices in place. We need to have guidelines and policies in place so that we are in a position to do so, to protect the individual. That's what the aim is. And of course, there's voice signal processing. There's the use of sensor data. There are huge research projects around those areas. So even in the video, we said, okay, we need to go towards a human-machine co-workership. We want humans and machines to work together, and that's the ideal world. Okay, the ideal world is not that the AI will replace humans. The ideal world is not that it will take over all the jobs. It doesn't mean that an AI that has been cleverly and smartly integrated into an education system or into a learning management system cannot function, but it just goes to say here that what is needed is that the humans, the educators, work hand in hand with the AI to provide a good educational system for the student in all its entirety. But we need to be aware of the harms that can be done, of the negative impacts that can be done. For example, another thing that comes to mind when we talk about virtual reality experiences, they're great as an immersive learning exercise, but it is so very easy to manipulate people through them. because being so immersive, they have a great power of manipulation. So the designer ultimately is responsible for what the person who's experiencing the VR is actually experiencing. So we really need to be very careful, especially when we design VR experiences for young children and for our children, for whoever really, that we are not manipulating them into thinking or being what the designer wants them to be. Okay, and ultimately we really need to think about responsibilities. Who will assign responsibilities? Who will take on responsibility? Who is accountable for that? Is it me designing the app or overseeing the project for designing the app for children with autism or for schizophrenia? Will I be responsible for that? Will I be held accountable for that? Or is it the person who took care of the filmography or the videography or the audio? Because, you know, it was scary. Okay. So we definitely need to look at codes of ethics, okay? When we are implementing something, when we are designing something, whether it's a game, whether it's an experience, whether it is the use of AI into our learning management systems, whether we're employing AI to analyze our learning stats and what's happening with our students, then we really need to follow this code of ethics. And when we talk about the code of ethics, we need to take into consideration questions that deal with data sets, with models, with predictions. And this is also something, data, you know, the classic garbage in, garbage out. And this is, you know, what the algorithms thrive on. This is where, you know, what AI lives on, data. But most often we do not really know where the data is coming from, do we? And we don't really know what sort of data is being fed. We just use the applications, we just use the systems, but we don't know where they're getting the information from. Apologies. So in one thing which I would have liked to show you is this video. It's a very short video. It's a film which I came across in the last few months. Quite interesting. It's called Coded Bias. I don't know if you've watched it. It's a documentary by a PhD student from MIT who by accident stumbled across this big flaw from Amazon's recognition software. Now, Amazon came up with this software, which is recognition, which is about facial recognition. It was such a big do that the FBI were using it, British police were using it, and it was in use in many countries all over the world, okay? The publications showed that it had a very low error rate. So, you know, governments and police officials could really trust it. But in reality, it had one big flaw, couldn't recognize dark skin. The rate of recognition for dark skin was like kind of ridiculously low. And this is what happened. So I'll show you a snippet from this video.
During my first semester at MIT, I got computer vision software that was supposed to track my face. It didn't work until I put on this white mask. I'm thinking, all right, what's going on here? Is it the lighting conditions? Is it the angle at which I'm looking at the camera, or is there something more? That's when I started looking into issues of bias that can creep into technology.
Our ideas about technology that we think are normal are actually ideas that come from a very small and homogeneous group of people.
Vast amounts of data at incredible speeds.
Everybody has unconscious biases, and people embed their own biases into technology.
This kid got stopped as a result of facial recognition misidentification, and then used that as justification to search you. This is an innocent child.
Racism is becoming mechanized.
Systemic issues are only going to be hardwired into new technologies.
It's not just face classification, it's any data-centric technology.
Every day, we are all being scored.
Who gets hired? Who gets housing?
I am making predictions for your life right now.
The people who own the code deploy it on other people, and there is no accountability.
Management analytic towers wanted to install the facial recognition software.
Pretty much turn this place into Fort Knox.
The technology is being rapidly adopted, and there are no safeguards.
We are socially controlled in a way that we don't see.
Technology that analyzes faces could be biased, but the company is pushing it anyway.
What demographic is it most effective on?
White men.
Show me that it's going to be fair, that it's legal, before you put it out. That's what we don't have yet.
It's going to take people coming together, striving for justice in this age of automation.
Yeah, so again, this is not about not using the technology, as they said in the video. It's about show me that it's fair. Show me that individuals won't come to harm when we use this kind of technology. And there are other issues, questions we need to ask. For example, if we consider issues of safety, of malicious use, of human-AI interaction, of privacy and agency, we ask, how safe is the AI for the humans to make use of? Can this AI, as I mentioned before, be manipulated to turn into a malicious outcome? And if yes, who will be responsible for this? Can the AI be trained to gradually use data and resulting predictions to harm an individual or a minority of individuals, a minority group? What about the human AI interactions? What happens when those interactions, such as, chatbots, turn into harmful conversations with children, with young people, with adults? Who would have control on these conversations if these turn harmful and negative? Microsoft had launched, I don't know if you remember, but way back, I think it was 2018, they had launched a bot on Twitter. It was called TAI. TAI. And basically, they launched it with a very good intention. They said, okay, all the people who feel lonely, they don't have anybody to tweet to, let's give them a companion, a bot that can tweet. And the AI they used was such that it was learning from the conversations which it was having with people. So you talk to Tai, Tai learns from your conversations and talks back to you. Unfortunately, they did not take into consideration that humans can be quite vicious. So within a few hours, Tai had turned into a xenophobe, homophobe, racist, complete utter villain. And within 16 hours, it had to be taken down completely. Okay. All it took was 16 hours to learn, the most horrible conversations, have the most horrific conversations with humans. Okay, so this is what we say. Okay, before rolling it out, we need to ask very, very important questions. We don't just roll out technology. We don't just roll out applications. We don't just do research is great. Okay, but we also need to be aware of what's happening on the wider scale. And then, of course, there are other questions that we need to ask about automation, about job loss, about democracy in itself, about the human-to-human interaction, because ultimately that is the final scope of AI, to improve the quality of life of humans. I keep saying that, but this is what I believe in. So I'll skip this video. I come to the end of my presentation because I'm running a bit late. And I found this particular quote, okay, which I think does summarize a little bit of what I have been saying. Applying AI is great. We can apply AI to solve many complex problems and be really good about it. The downside is that AI is going to create these chambers that magnify ignorance, unfortunately, and we do have to do something about that. Thank you for your attention.
First question coming up.
Vanessa, thank you. So one of the questions I have then, I'm a teacher educator in the United States. And so with AI's ability to learn based on patterns, when you use the simulations with students with autism, did the adults using those simulations start to apply that same kind of pattern setting to other scenarios?
Yeah.
For students beyond those students that were autistic?
there were because our experience was based inside a classroom, inside a primary classroom. It was fascinating to see that, for example, I would say the greatest majority of the teachers were more aware of their surroundings. So, for example, the first thing they did was they actually decided to change some of the clocks, the ticking of the clocks. The experience showed how terribly frustrating and overstimulating the ticking goes, especially for a child who may be hypersensitive to certain sounds and stimuli. There were teachers who I spoke to because we followed up like 2 months after the experience to see, whether they had retained some of their knowledge. They said they were very more aware, like even if they were out inside, they were out in the yard and the children were playing, they were more conscious that if the level of noise was, for example, too much, they might go to the child with autism and, even hold the person's hand just to give them a calming feeling. And there were other such instances. Again, there were teachers who had a habit of, for example, me with my glasses doing this. Again, they told me, no, that's a no. I'm no longer doing it. I'm keeping my glasses over there and all my pencils over there, And also the way they were approaching children on the autism spectrum, because in the experience, we used a narration voice. In film, it's called the voice of God. When you can hear your thoughts, and this is what we use to lead the teachers into seeing the stimuli around. This voice of God was also the representation of the voice of the child. The child would say, oh, but why is the teacher speaking to me like I am an idiot? I'm not an idiot. I'm just hypersensitive to stimuli. So even the way the teachers were approaching these children changed. So I believe that it did quite some good. The only thing is that it was a limited experience, and I believe we didn't show all the facets of autism. So that's one of the issues.
Hi there. Thanks a lot for that talk. That was really interesting. I also work with teachers in Ireland, and I've got a question about automation bias, which is kind of this phenomenon with which I'm sure most of you are familiar, where people follow Google Maps with such fidelity that they drive their car into the ocean. And I just wonder if you could, this might be a little rhetorical and a little bit simplistic, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about whether or the extent to which, as educators, we should be concerned with automation bias when it comes to designing and developing tools like VR teacher training experiences. So for example, if I go through VR trainings on working with autistic children, and then I get into a room with autistic children, is there not a risk that I might say, well, that didn't happen in the simulation, why is this happening here? So to what extent do we need to factor in automation bias? I think, and this maybe goes for everybody in this room, but when using and designing new educational technologies.
This is all about built experiences. We build experiences bit by bit. VR experience may give you a short chunk, of that particular instance. It might lead to a person building mental associations that can then be used to keep on building experiences. But with a VR experience, even a one-off VR experience, it doesn't mean that the person is going to get better at something, or that the person is suddenly illuminated into thinking, that they know everything. As I said, that's one of the dangers, in fact. And that's one of the why we need ethical questions to ask about. Sorry, it's my son that's calling, saying it's late. So it is one of the questions that we really need to ask, that, where is this experience going to lead? The teacher, okay, where do we want the teacher to get to? What sort of directions do we want the teacher to get to? And this is why every such experience, especially one that is driven by technology, now whether this has AI input or not, it needs to be backed with the necessary human expertise. So there needs to be a lot of human input to be able to drive those experiences forward and ultimately reach the outcome that is desired. So a standalone single experience is going to do nothing. Okay, it's going to be novel, it's going to be nice, it's going to be fun. Teachers are going to give you feedback on your evaluation form and say, oh, this is really fun. But then in the long term, what are we doing? Okay, so we really need to go into the cognitive level here. We're going to dig into the affective levels, the cognitive levels, the behavioral levels all together. AI is needed. AI can facilitate. If we use technologies, whether it's AI, whether we use, AI injected into VR, okay, it's going to make the experiences deeper, augment them, richer, okay, but we really need the human input. Yeah.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I share your concern with ethical implications. So I just want to share a concern and maybe a provocation. I'd be very interested in your thoughts. So when you talked about Thai, I thought that was very interesting, and also it kind of I think there are many similar examples where this may be just my reaction, but where I'm like, really, you were surprised by that? You spent all this money and all this time, and you didn't think about that, right?
Yeah.
And so it seems to me that a lot of AI research is imbued with this naivete of how great the world will be if only we get this one more technology, and then it'll be then we'll be fine.
And it will be a failure.
And even in the video that you showed, that even in Coded Bias, which I think is a very good documentary, even there's the kind of underlying sense of, oh, there's no problem with the technology, we just need to get it right first, right? And so my provocation is, maybe we won't get it right, and maybe we shouldn't go there. Of course, I think my own provocation is very naive, because I know that we can't keep our fingers out of the cookie jar. Of course, we'll go there, but I guess maybe we shouldn't. And I'll just give you one example. There's which is in the area of mental health, and there's so much enthusiasm for AI for mental health. And this is coupled with very strong lobbying and recognition among mental health practitioners and advocacy groups, and also, of course, parents and people who have mental health conditions, that more support is needed. And the support isn't there. There are not enough people. The healthcare system cannot keep up. And so, AI is the solution. In spite of a lot of evidence that it doesn't work, and in fact often causes more harm than help. But still, it's too compelling. We have to go there.
Okay. I do not necessarily agree, and I've said this during the presentation, that because the technology or AI can expose individuals, there may be a possibility that individuals may be exposed to harm, then we don't use the technology. I don't think it's that. What I think is that these big tech giants who actually come up with these phenomena, this technology, they don't take any benefit from running accurate ethics and ethical guidelines and policies. In fact, that is one of the reasons, you could see it even in Coded Bias, why governments have failed to take a stand on that. Nobody wants to trample on the big tech giants' toes. But having said that, it doesn't mean that we should stop research in the area. It means what we need to do as a population in general, as countries, but also as individuals, is to push for justice when apps of this sort are designed. And when we ourselves as researchers design experiences, design apps, we produce material, then we need to show, it is our duty and our role to show that, yes, this can work, but these are the ways in which it can go wrong. And therefore, before doing something like this and rolling it out to the public, then developers need to ask these questions, and these need to be in place so that the individuals are protected and there's equality for all, really.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I have a question, I guess a couple questions. And, AI has been fraught with a lot of issues related to humans' own inability to not create emotional entanglements with AI. There was the guy at Google who got fired because he insisted it was alive.
Lambda.
Yeah, and then recently, when Bing tried to integrate ChatGPT or GPT-4, their AI went rogue and tried to convince this person that they weren't in love with their partner and that they actually loved it, the bot. And it seems like, as AI emerges in these interactive forms and especially when they're given these physical manifestations like Baby X that we saw in the video, that there's an issue of our human predisposition to want to connect and have empathy with humans and people. And it makes me think, oh, maybe we need some education on how not to get entangled with AI. But that seems quite dangerous because then you're essentially saying, how can we train people to be less empathetic when they see physical forms of other humans? So I guess I have a couple questions there. One of them would be, do you have any suggestions for how to educate people on how to interact with AI? And to stay in a headspace that's healthy. And also, is there really an ethical use to hyper-realistic human AI? Can that ever be ethical? Because I'm a mom, and when I saw that toddler, I was like, oh, this makes me sick. That toddler looks alive. And that's a really powerful gut emotion that is very easy to exploit. So is it ever ethical? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. So both on how we can train our own brains without losing the important emotional aspects of ourselves, and also whether or not it's ethical for developers to be doing that as well. Thank you.
I'll start with the first one because the second one is, I think, warrants probably a very long, deep philosophical discussion. But the first one, how can we help people limit their attachment to AI? I think the key is education. Okay, I think that from a young age we need to educate children and young people into what really is AI, what makes AI. We, as part of George's project, which was Machine to Learn to Machine Learn, at the Department of AI, myself and Matthew and another colleague were responsible for publishing a book. It was called Artificial AI in Education, a guide for young people. And the idea was that of trying to teach concepts of AI without actually mentioning AI. Okay, so we wanted to teach concepts of, for example, I don't know, something simple, reinforcement learning through a game of paper, rock, paper, scissors. The game they play in class. So we were playing with young children, and the teacher was simulating the AI, and the children were playing this rock, paper, scissors, and they were creating this combination of matrices and stuff based on predictions and patterns and stuff like that. But as part of the book, we also delved into ethical and philosophical questions. So at one point, we had an activity with classrooms, with students, that delved into having conversations with Alexa, for example, or Siri, because this was spurned, again, being a mother myself, it was spurned by seeing children and the children of my friends and also my son having these crazily weird conversations with Siri. And using foul language with Siri, okay, their enjoyment, they were tending to be aggressive. And I was like, do you really know who you're talking? Yeah, it's Siri, can take it. And it was attributing these human characteristics. They were sort of bonding with these. And we wanted children to really understand, because if you start understanding from a young age your interaction with technology, then there is a great probability that when you grow older, you will retain that knowledge and you might change your attitudes and behaviors. I don't think there is a single recipe that a country or government can do like this and teach everyone not to interact, even from an old age. So I think it's a process that we need to go through. And I think that education is key. For the second question, whether it's ethical or not, to tell you the truth, even when I saw it first, I was a bit like, oh dear, okay. But That's why I said it's a provocation. This is where research, this is where certain people are heading towards, and we need to be aware of what's happening there. Is it ethical? Is it not? I'm not sure. I think that's a very complex situation, and it needs a lot of debate for that. Thank you. Yep.
Donna Dolberg, thank you for presenting. As baby Becky that we've seen in the video matures and becomes more human-like, in your opinion, at what point does she earn rights?
Oh, that was, in fact, it was one of the points there. Questions we need to ask. Yes, again, these are parts of the questions that we really need to ask ourselves. What will happen with robots' rights? Because there is a movement, okay? There are groups of people who are already trying to lay the ground for this kind of development in AI research. What will happen when robots will have a level of, let's say, consciousness? I don't know whether we call it consciousness or not, but this level of humanization, okay? Will we be talking about robots' rights over there? Will we be talking about democratization? We don't know. As yet, these are these are questions that are being asked by tech leaders and also researchers in the field of development of AI. At the moment, it's what they are, just questions, okay? What will happen? But we definitely need to have the framework, policies, the guidelines in place for when that does happen. I wouldn't say it's going to happen tomorrow, but in the next few decades, we might see quite some advancements in that area.
Final, last question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to piggyback a little bit on that last question, because I too, as a person who raised a child, you know, seeing that baby, and part of me is going, that's incredible. And part of me is like, ew, that's creepy. You know, the uncanny valley, as they used to say, do you want the robotics thing to be more or less human, and who will it freak out? And one really wonderful use of that is in places like Japan, where there's no one to take care of the elderly, and they like a human, like, you know, so it's very complex. And education obviously is the fundamental answer. And I live in the USA, where, you know, there's a segment of the population that really wants to go back to the Middle Ages and really destroy education. To be blunt, they do. And you don't know, they don't want any education, and you know, it's appalling. And I'm not going to say it's half the country, it's a segment, very vocal. Okay. But to, you know, beyond that, I'm thinking, right, you don't want to necessarily say, here's how to interact with technology, as opposed to here's how to interact. And I was thinking, you know, really wonderful models for that we can look at. It's like, look at how Norway treats its criminals. That, you know, one is that occurred to me, I have a lot of African American friends, is the code switching that people do. And I've been in groups that were mixed, and they'll talk one way to that friend and half a sentence over here, or kids doing Spanglish in New Mexico.
We do the same.
It's a very robust, long developed model of how do you interact in different, or in multilingual environments in which I grew up, and obviously a lot of people here speak multiple languages, is when you meet an expat from the US who's lived in foreign countries, they speak in a particular way that's nice and clear. And I find myself adopting that. And to all my parents' friends growing up, it's like, you don't tell the Hungarian person, like, oh, no, you know, you say, I need to leave now. That kind of level of awareness.
Yeah.
And the other really robust model is interspecies communication, especially for education with children who respond to this, people who work with animals, primates, mammals, and communicate with them. And the expertise they've developed in that code switching or guessing what's being received and how well. So that obviously, I guess I'm asking, you know, is something, you've incorporated, like that experience where the parents watching that scenario in a classroom, you suddenly realize, oh, there's another consumer user here, and this is having a very different impact.
Absolutely.
Right.
In that case, I think that we really need to adapt what we come up with, the outcomes, the products that we design to the different audiences. It's not just a one size fits all. You really need to know your people, the needs. It's again underrated, the word needs analysis, requirements analysis, which is just a word there. But it's very, very important to know the person you're designing for, the person that you are going to ultimately affect. That's very important.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, from the organization committee. Small
you.
gift.
Thank
you very much. It's time for a coffee break till 10 to noon. It's on level